This video is about the unsung battles of American history that mattered. Subscribe for more. In the early dawn of a cold November morning in 1944, the air crackled with tension over the remnants of a once bustling town in eastern France, now reduced to rubble by years of relentless conflict. The echoes of gunfire and the distant rumble of artillery served as a grim reminder of the horrors of war. Sergeant Paul Anderson shuffled through the rubble, his breath forming clouds in the crisp air as he surveyed the charred landscape. His heart raced not just from the fear of enemy encounters, but from the pressure of an impending mission that could tip the scales in the bitter battle against the Nazi regime. Anderson, a veteran of the Normandy invasion, was no stranger to the brutality of war. He bore the scars of combat, both seen and unseen, and wore the insignia of his unit, the 101st Airborne Division, with pride. His squad had survived the blood-soaked beaches of France, but now they faced a new enemy in the form of the German Wehrmacht, who were regrouping for a ferocious counter-offensive known as the Battle of the Bulge. Whispers of a secret German operation had reached Allied command, hinting at the Nazis' desperate bid to retake control of the war. The Allies had to find the heart of this operation and crush it before it could even begin. Anderson glanced around, spotting familiar faces amidst the shadows of rubble. Corporal Jimmy Reyes, a sharpshooter from Texas, adjusted his rifle, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Beside him stood Private Lisa Cohen, a fiercely determined medic who had joined the fight after her family had fled the Nazis' grasp in Europe. Both had faced their demons, each one driven by a personal vendetta against the forces that sought to obliterate freedom. They formed an unlikely alliance, yet their shared commitment to each other and their country forged a bond that transcended the battlefield. "Are you ready for this?" Reyes asked, his voice steady but laced with concern. "Ready as I'll ever be," Anderson replied, tightening his grip on his weapon. "We need to be quick. If we wait too long, they'll all be back on their feet, and we can let that happen. We need to cut the head off the snake." With a nod of agreement, Cohen checked her medical supplies. "We'll follow your lead, Sergeant, but let us not forget that saving lives is just as important as taking out the enemy." As they moved deeper into enemy territory, the tension thickened. The landscape transformed, revealing remnants of towns that had once been vibrant and alive, now ghostly silhouettes against the cloudy sky. Each step felt laden with the weight of history, a history that linked them not only as soldiers but as representatives of their respective nations, each fighting for liberty as survival on a desolate European battleground. The whispers of the past echoed in Anderson's mind. He thought of the American Revolution, the War of 1812, and the bloody Civil War. Each conflict was a chapter in the story of a nation, a story that had led them here, to this moment. He also thought of the tragedies in Europe, World War I, the rise of fascism, and how the world was now gripped in a fight against tyranny once more. Suddenly, a distant explosion shattered the silence, jolting the squad from their thoughts. Anderson motioned for them to take cover behind a crumbling wall. He peered around the corner, spotting a convoy of German vehicles approaching. The unmistakable black cross on the sides ignited a primal instinct within him. The enemy was on the move, and they had to act quickly. "Listen up," he whispered. "We take out that convoy, we'll disrupt their supply lines and make a statement. We need to split into two teams. Reyes, you and Cohen scout the left flank. I'll take the right. We'll converge on the tracks." "Got it." The squad nodded, adrenaline coursing through their veins. They dispersed, hearts pounding as they moved into position, each step bringing them closer to a confrontation that would define their role in history. Anderson took cover behind a pile of debris, watching the convoy. His pulse quickened as he spotted a group of German soldiers disembarking, their faces cold and indifferent as they secured the perimeter. He could sense the looming danger. Time was slipping through his fingers like sand. The moment arrived. Anderson raised his rifle, carefully lining up his shot. The crack of gunfire rang out, piercing the air like a blade, and chaos erupted. The German soldiers scrambled for cover, confusion rippling through their ranks. Reyes unleashed a volley from his vantage point while Cohen moved swiftly, tending to a wounded comrade in the chaos. "Keep them pinned down," Anderson shouted, reloading his weapon with a steady hand. The battle intensified, bullets whizzing past like angry hornets. Anderson's focus narrowed to the trucks, their cargo essential for the German war effort. They had to stop this at all costs. With each shot fired, he felt the ghosts of those who had fought before him urging him on. The stakes were high, and failure wasn't an option. Anderson spotted a small group of German soldiers attempting to flank their position. "Reyes, watch your left." He yelled, but before the warning could reach him, a deafening explosion erupted nearby as a grenade detonated, sending debris flying. Jimmy, Cohen shouted, dashing toward him. Anderson could see Reyes lying in a heap, blood pooling beneath him. Fear ignited in his chest as he dove for cover, heart racing as he called out to his fallen comrade. "Stay with me, brother. You are going to be all right." Anderson could feel the tide of battle shifting, the desperation of the moment gripping him. They were outnumbered, and chaos reigned around them. But amidst the violence, a spark ignited within him. They were not just soldiers, they were part of a grand narrative that spanned continents, a narrative steeped in sacrifice and valor. The conflict wasn't merely a clash of armies, it was about ideals, about the very essence of humanity, and that was worth fighting for. They could either falter in the face of adversity or rise to the occasion, just as countless warriors before them had done. With renewed vigor, Anderson rallied his squad. "We can't give up now, for Reyes, for freedom. Let us take the fight to them." As his voice cut through the din of battle, the squad surged forward. Cohen, defying the odds, managed to stem Reyes' bleeding, while Anderson led the charge with fierce resolve. The German soldiers were caught off guard as the tide swung in their favor, the resolve of the American squad igniting like a wildfire. But as they pressed deeper into enemy territory, a larger confrontation loomed over them. An underground Nazi operation, shrouded in secrecy, had been unveiled, revealing a threat that could change the course of the war altogether. Anderson knew they were on the precipice of something monumental, yet they remained unaware of the larger forces at play. The battle raged on, but with each victory, the answers they sought began to emerge. The mystery of the operation intertwined with their struggle, revealing an intricate web of alliances and betrayals that spanned beyond borders. As they fought for survival, the fate of not just their squad, but of nations hung in the balance. Anderson felt a new sense of purpose, a calling far greater than he had ever imagined. Their fight was just beginning, a single chapter in the vast history of war, alliances, and the pursuit of freedom. The lessons of the past echoed in their hearts, propelling them forward into an uncertain future. With every gunshot and every fallen comrade, they forged a path that would lead them toward destiny. Victory was within their grasp, but the ultimate test of courage lay ahead. As the dust settled and the echoes of war faded into the distance, Anderson stood at the crossroads of history. The stage was set for an unfathomable showdown against the forces of tyranny, and he was determined to emerge victorious. What secrets lay buried beneath the rubble they had just fought so hard to reclaim, and how would they change the course of the war? The answers awaited them, wrapped in the fog of battle and the shadows of those who fought before. They were about to uncover the unsung battles of American history that mattered most, and it would take them far beyond the European front lines. Anderson took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. This was not just about proving their mettle, this was about securing a future for generations to come. And with that thought in mind, he advanced into the darkness, ready to unveil the truths hidden beneath the surface. The war was far from over, and the greatest battles lay ahead. The darkness enveloped Anderson as he advanced cautiously into the rubble-strewn streets of the town, the aftermath of the skirmish still palpable in the air. The distant sounds of artillery fire echoed like a lament for the fallen, a stark reminder that each step forward was laden with risk. He could feel the weight of history on his shoulders, a collective burden shared by all who had fought before him. Cohen's voice broke through the tension. She had stabilized Reyes, who now lay propped against a crumbling wall, pale and still. "He needs a doctor. We can't stay here much longer." Anderson glanced back, the urgency in her tone pressing against his resolve. Reyes, his brother in arms, stared at the sky, breath shallow and strained, a sight that ignited a fire within Anderson's heart. "We'll get him out, Lisa," he promised, but his mind raced. The Germans would be regrouping, and they had to move, not just for Reyes, but for the fate of the war hanging in the balance. "We need intel," Anderson said determinedly as he crouched beside them. "If we can find out what they're replanning, we might disrupt their operations even further. They can't afford to lose momentum after this calamity." Reyes managed a weak grin, though pain flickered in his eyes. "You are not leaving me behind, Sergeant." "I am not done yet." Cohen shot him a look, her eyes softening. "You just focus on healing. We'll make sure you have something to tell your grandchildren." Anderson nodded, acknowledging the warrior spirit in Reyes. "Hold tight, Jimmy. We'll find a way to get you to safety. For now, keep your head down." He placed a reassuring hand on Reyes' shoulder before rising, determination hardening his resolve. Trio's survival depended on quick thinking, and they needed to find the core of the German operation. Anderson motioned for Cohen to keep an eye on Reyes while he scouted ahead. He moved with purpose, the wreckage of the town looming around him, remnants of lives once lived near the backdrop of a new conflict. As he crept through the debris, he stumbled upon a hidden entrance, an unassuming door half buried in rubble. Faint sounds of German voices drifted through the cracked wood, each syllable a tantalizing clue to the operations underway. Anderson's heart raced. This could be it, the thread they needed to unravel the whole operation. He gestured for Cohen to join him, and they slipped inside the dimly lit room. The air was thick with dust, and the faint scent of smoke lingered. A group of German officers huddled over a map, their voices low but urgent. Anderson strained to listen, heart pounding as he leaned closer. "The LL pushed through the Ardennes," one officer said in a clipped tone. "Führer demands swift action. The intelligence reports indicate that the Americans are disoriented," another officer replied. "But if we do not move quickly, the tides may turn. We cannot let our advantage slip away." Anderson exchanged a glance with Cohen. They had stumbled upon a pivotal moment in a war, an opportunity to strike at the heart of Nazi plans. He quietly took out a small notepad, scribbling down key details, the officers' conversation illuminating the darkness that surrounded them. Cohen whispered, her eyes wide with both fear and excitement. "We have to," Anderson replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "This intel is invaluable. If we can disrupt their plans, it could buy the Allies critical time." Just then, a loud crash echoed outside. The officers snapped to attention, weapons drawn. Anderson felt a surge of adrenaline. They had to act now or never. He motioned for Cohen to prepare herself, then steeled himself for what was to come. With a decisive nod, he kicked the door open and charged into the room, weapon drawn. "Get down," he shouted as bullets began to fly in a flurry of chaos. The officers reacted quickly, ducking behind furniture, the momentary confusion working in Anderson's favor. He aimed at the nearest officer, pulling the trigger with precision. The man fell, and the others scrambled for cover. "Cohen," he yelled over the din. "Security exit. We can't let them escape." Cohen dove toward the back door, her training guiding her movements. She kept her rifle steady, watching for any German soldiers trying to flank them. Anderson continued firing, adrenaline pumping through his veins as he navigated the chaotic room, every shot bringing them closer to a decisive victory. One officer managed to scramble toward a window, but before he could escape, Cohen's shot rang true, taking him down. Anderson felt a rush of exhilaration and resolve. They were making history, changing the course of the battle with each precise action. The room echoed with gunfire, and soon silence fell, leaving only the heavy breathing of the two soldiers. They stood amidst the remnants of conflict, adrenaline still coursing through their bodies. The officers lay scattered, their plans thwarted, but the real challenge was yet to come. "I think we got what we came for," Cohen said, eyes wide with disbelief, inspecting the chaotic scene. "This fight isn't over yet." Anderson nodded, stuffing the map into his pocket, heart racing at the thought of the larger implications of their actions. "Let us move. If the Germans regroup, we'll be outnumbered, and we can't let this slip away." As they made their way back through the rubble, the urgency of their mission propelled them forward. Each step felt like a threshold and entryway into a larger conflict that stretched beyond the immediate battlefield, intertwining their destiny with the fates of nations. The streets buzzed with the aftermath of battle, yet Anderson felt a flicker of hope. They had struck a blow to the enemy, but the war was far from over. His thoughts drifted to the significance of their actions. It was about more than survival. It was about the values they fought for, the ideals that would shape the world in the years to come. They emerged into the cold air, the sounds of distant artillery fire mingling with the cries of the wounded. A grim reminder of the costs of war. But now, they possessed critical information, the key to dismantling the German plans. Cohen took a moment to catch her breath, the reality of their situation dawning on her. "We did it, Sergeant. We might have changed everything," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Not yet," Anderson replied, glancing toward the horizon where dark clouds loomed, a storm brewing on the battlefield. "We have to get to Rees and then push this intel to command. The fight is just beginning." With renewed purpose, they set off toward their comrade, each step echoing the silent vows they made to honor the past, to fight for the future, and to ensure that the sacrifices made would not be in vain. But as they neared the location where they had left Rees, an ominous feeling washed over Anderson. The stakes were higher than ever, and though they had disrupted the enemy, they could feel the eyes of the Nazi regime closing in. A distant rumble of engines pierced the air, and Anderson's heart sank. "We were not alone," he muttered, peering towards the sound. The Germans were mobilizing, and they had to move quickly. "Let us get to Ray's," Cohen urged, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. As they sprinted back, the weight of the world pressed upon them. They were part of a larger telesaga of war, resilience, and the fight for freedom that connected them all. Anderson felt the gravity of what was unfolding, the unsung battles that had threaded through history and the ones yet to come. The battle for Europe was reaching a fever pitch, but within the chaos, hope remained. If they could outsmart the enemy this time, they could change the course of destiny itself. The fight for survival, freedom, and justice had only begun. Anderson took a deep breath as they pressed onward, the echoes of history guiding their path. "Let us do this," he said, resolute. "For Ray's, for freedom." But as they rounded the corner, the sight that met them sent a chill down Anderson's spine. Ray's lay alone against the wall, and around them, shadows began to gather, figures emerging from the smoke, the unmistakable silhouettes of German soldiers converging on their position. A new battle loomed, and this time everything was on the line. The stakes were higher than ever, and the fate of not just their squad, but of nations hung in the balance. What lay ahead was a crucible that would define their legacy, a test of courage and resolve against the forces of tyranny. Anderson steeled himself. History was about to write another chapter, and they would be at the forefront ready to face whatever came next. Anderson's heart raced as he took in the scene before him. The German soldiers emerged from the smoke, their weapons drawn, eyes scanning the area. Ray's lay pale and still, vulnerable amid the chaos, the embodiment of the price of war. "Cohen, we have to move." Anderson barked, urgency flooding his voice. They couldn't afford to hesitate, the shadows of tyranny were closing in around them. Cohen's eyes widened as she processed the situation. "We can leave him," she insisted, her voice strained with emotion. "He needs medical help now." But Anderson knew the harsh truth of battle, they were outnumbered and exposed. "We can save him if we recaptured. We need to create a diversion." Without waiting for a response, Anderson quickly scanned the area, searching for anything they could use. A discarded wooden crate caught his eye, half buried in rubble. With a fierce determination, he moved toward it, grabbing it and dragging it behind the wall. "Help me with this," he shouted, gesturing for Cohen to follow. As they positioned the crate near a corner, he had a plan forming, a desperate gamble. "When I give the signal, we'll draw their fire and create enough chaos to get Ray's out of here," he explained, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Cohen bit her lip, torn between concern for Ray's and the need for survival. "I hope you know what you were doing, Sergeant," she replied, her voice steadying as resolve took over. Together, they set the crate as a makeshift barricade, preparing for the storm to come. "Get ready," Anderson whispered, casting a glance toward Ray's, whose labored breaths echoed in the stillness of the moment. They had to do this. For him. For all of them. On my count. 3, 2, 1. He stood up from behind the barricade, weapon raised, and began firing at the approaching German squad. Each shot was deliberate, a sharp crack breaking the tension of the air. Cohen quickly followed suit, and the sound of gunfire rang out like a war cry, drawing the attention of the enemy soldiers. "Over here," Anderson shouted, hoping to divert their focus. The Germans reacted instinctively, returning fire in their direction. Bullets whizzed past, and shouts of alarm echoed as they scrambled for cover. This is their chance. The Anderson bellowed, sprinting back toward Ray's, motioning for Cohen to follow. They rushed to their comrade's side, Anderson crouching low beside him. "Jimmy, we're getting you out of here," he said, forcing the words through the panic swelling in his chest. "Sergeant, I can it." Ray's gasped, his voice barely above a whisper, but Anderson couldn't entertain the thought of leaving him behind. "Cohen, help me lift him." They worked together, positioning Ray's between them. Every second felt like an eternity as the sound of footsteps drew nearer. They pulled him up, moving slowly but purposefully as they retraced their steps toward the barricade. The German soldiers, realizing the diversion was a feint, began closing in, their numbers overwhelming. "We need to get to that alley," Cohen urged, pointing toward a narrow passageway just ahead. Anderson nodded, determination stiffening his resolve. 1, 3, we move. 1, 2, 3. They bolted toward the alley, the weight of Ray slowing their pace. Anderson shielded them with his body, returning fire as they retreated into the shadows. The alley was dark, the walls littered with remnants of the town's former glory. Anderson urged, guiding Cohen and Ray's deeper into the narrow corridor, the distinct sounds of battle echoing behind them. But amidst the danger, they needed a moment to regroup, to catch their breath. Once they reached a corner, they slid to the ground, panting heavily. Anderson glanced at Reyes, whose face was pale, but his eyes remained fiercely determined. "You're going to be okay, Jimmy. Just hold on," he said, trying to mask the worry in his voice. Reyes gasped, forcing words through clenched teeth, his spirit unyielding. Anderson nodded, pulling out the folded map he had taken from the officers. "We did. It is going to change everything." Cohen looked at Anderson, her expression a mix of pride and apprehension. "But we need to get it back to command. If we don't, this will all have been for nothing." As they sat in the shadows, the sounds of the battle faded to a low rumble, drawing their focus inward. Anderson felt the weight of history pressing down on him. This was about more than just survival. It was about the struggle for freedom, the fight against oppression that transcended borders, a narrative woven into the fabric of their nation. "This is our moment," he said, raising his voice, determination igniting his spirit. "We re part of something bigger. Every soldier before us fought for a reason, and we re not going to let their sacrifices be in vain." Cohen nodded, her eyes brightening. "We can't go back empty-handed. We need to expose their plans." But before they could collect themselves further, a loud crash echoed from the entrance of the alley. A group of German soldiers had breached the location. Anderson shouted, adrenaline surging through him once more. They hurriedly lifted Reyes again, the urgency propelling them forward. Anderson led the way, aware that the bulk of their efforts depended on a swift and calculated escape. They navigated through the narrow alley, turning corners of purpose until they emerged into another street, remnants of the town still clouding their vision. Yet, just as they thought they had found a moment of safety, they heard the distinct sound of a vehicle approaching, the unmistakable growl of a German truck. Anderson's heart sank. "We need to find cover." He scanned the area, spotting a dilapidated building nearby. They dashed toward the structure, the shadows concealing their movements as they slipped inside. The air was stagnant, thick with dust and neglect, but it provided a temporary reprieve. "We need to find a way to signal command," Cohen urged, her eyes darting around. Anderson nodded, searching the room. In the back corner, he found a rare communication device, likely left behind by previous inhabitants. He hurried to it, fumbling with the dials, desperate to make contact. Come on," he muttered, the urgency of their situation amplifying each second. In the midst of his frantic efforts, the door creaked open. Without hesitation, Anderson turned, weapon raised. Cohen followed suit, eyes wide as they prepared for another confrontation. But it wasn't a German soldier who emerged from the shadows. It was a fellow American soldier, his uniform tattered but unmistakable. "Sergeant Anderson," the soldier exclaimed, recognition lighting up his face. "Command is aware of the German operation. We need to move now, or we'll be overwhelmed." Relief flooded through Anderson as he lowered his weapon. "We have intel that can change everything," he replied, quickly relaying the details. "They then let us go," the soldier urged, glancing nervously at the entrance. "They were coming this way." Anderson's mind raced. The mission was no longer just about survival, it was about seizing the moment, about transforming the tide of war itself. "Cohen, can you help Reyes? We need to make it out of here." "Of course," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos closing in around them. "But we need to move quickly." They regrouped, Anderson taking point as they prepared to escape. The adrenaline surged through him like wildfire, a reminder of what was at stake. They had a chance to disrupt the enemy, to rewrite the course of history itself, but only if they could outsmart the looming threat. As they navigated their way through the labyrinth of debris, the distant sounds of battle began to swell again. Each moment felt like a heartbeat, the pressure rising as they neared the exit. But suddenly, the ground shook beneath them, a heavy explosion shaking the foundation of the building, dust swirling around them like a tempest. Anderson shouted, pushing Cohen and Reyes ahead as they stumbled out into the street. The chaos outside was palpable, a whirlwind of gunfire and shouting, the battle raging with renewed fervor. For a fleeting moment, Anderson felt the weight of history pressing down upon him, the lives lost, the sacrifices made, all culminating in this very moment. They had to be the turning point, the spark that could ignite freedom across the continent. "Let us get to the command post," he yelled, determination etched on his face. For Reyes. For freedom. And as they sprinted toward their fate, the echoes of history and hope surged within them, the unsung battles of American history urging them forward, guiding them toward destiny. They were about to confront the imminent storm, and the fate of nations hung in the balance. But amidst the chaos, an enemy force lurked, ready to strike at any moment. With each heartbeat, they edged closer to the revelation of a deeper conspiracy, a plot that could entwine them not only with the fate of their squad, but with the thread of history stretching beyond the boundaries of the war-torn landscape. As they sprinted through the rubble, Anderson felt the weight of rays leaning against him, but they were fueled by determination. The staccato of gunfire resonated around them, the cries of conflict vibrating against the backdrop of a world in turmoil. They had to reach the command post to deliver their vital intel and allow it to ripple through the ranks, changing the course of the battle and perhaps even the war itself. With every step, the streets transformed, the skeletal remains of buildings forming a twisted maze. Anderson led the way, Cohen close behind with Ray steadying himself against her as they navigated the debris. The cries for help from fellow soldiers mingled with the sounds of combat, a poignant reminder of the stakes they faced. History hung in the balance, and they were determined to make their mark. Over there, that is the way, Anderson shouted, pointing toward a gutted building that appeared to house a makeshift command center. The door swung open as they approached, revealing a group of American soldiers crowded inside, their faces etched with determination. The room was cluttered with maps and radio equipment, their eyes widening as they spotted Anderson and his squad. "We thought you'd been lost," the commanding officer exclaimed, relief breaking through the tension. "What news do you bring?" Anderson, his heart pounding, stepped forward, detailing the intel gathered at the German operation. "They believe they have the advantage, but we can disrupt their supply lines and communications if we act quickly." The room fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. "Your intel could turn the tide," the officer replied, urgency flooding his tone. "We need to mobilize our forces and strike before they realize they've been compromised." But just as plans began to form, the rumble of German trucks grew louder outside, their engines roaring ominously in the distance. Anderson's instincts kicked in. They had to act fast. "We need to fortify this position and prepare for a counteroffensive. If they come here and find us unprepared, no time for hesitation," the officer interjected, clenching his jaw. "We can let them take this place. Get the men ready. We must hold our ground." Anderson nodded, adrenaline surging through him as he rallied the group. They quickly divided tasks. Some soldiers set up defenses while others armed themselves, preparing for the inevitable clash. Cohen remained by Ray's side, desperately assessing his condition, and though pain etched across his features, he refused to yield. "I am not out of this fight yet," he managed through labored breaths. "Stay strong, Jimmy," Cohen encouraged, her hands working deftly over his wounds. "We'll all get through this." As the minutes ticked away, the tension in the command center grew palpable. Anderson peered out a cracked window, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the German convoy drawing nearer, trucks filled with soldiers and supplies rolling down the street. "They're coming, get ready," he shouted, adrenaline flooding the room. The American soldiers braced themselves, rifles poised, hearts pounding in unison with the impending battle. Anderson felt the weight of history pressing down upon him. This was more than just a fight. This was the heartbeat of nations, the struggle for freedom that transcended borders, and he would not falter. "Remember what we were fighting for," Anderson called out, his voice steady, infusing the men and women around him with resolve. "For our country, for our families, for the future." A collective cheer erupted, and the tension morphed into an electrifying camaraderie. The trucks came to a halt, German soldiers spilling out, their laughter ringing out in the cold air. They were unaware of the ambush that awaited them. "On my mark," the officer said, glancing at Anderson, who nodded in agreement. 3, 2, 1. The command rang out, and a barrage of gunfire erupted from the command center, bullets striking true as chaos descended. The German soldiers, caught off guard, scrambled for cover, and the air crackled with the intensity of battle. Anderson moved with precision, firing at the advancing troops while coordinating with the others. The sound of gunfire was deafening, punctuated by the cries of wounded men. Through the haze of combat, he spotted Cohen tending to Ray's, her fierce determination shining through even as the battle raged around them. "Keep him safe, Lisa," Anderson shouted, reloading his weapon as more German soldiers pushed forward. "We'll hold them off." The fight was brutal. Each moment felt like a lifetime as soldiers on both sides fought fiercely for dominance. Anderson felt the rush of adrenaline, the realization that they were part of something greater, a struggle that stretched beyond the battlefield, tied to the very essence of humanity. Minutes transformed into an eternity as the tide of battle ebbed and flowed. Anderson's squad fought valiantly, their resolve unyielding even as the German forces pressed harder. But as the battle raged on, the sound of distant artillery boomed, reverberating through the streets. "Reinforcements," a soldier shouted, and Anderson's heart leaped with hope. The Allies were closing in. They could win this fight, turn the tide against tyranny and oppression. Keep it together, Anderson roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. But with renewed strength, they fought back against the advancing German soldiers, pushing them further into disarray. The fight surged forward, an explosion of valor and sacrifice echoing through the air, each shot fired an act of defiance against the dark forces of the world. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the command center, sending debris flying. Anderson was hurled to the ground, vision spinning. As he groaned, struggling to recover, he reached for his weapon only to find a German soldier standing over him, weapon raised. But before the soldier could pull the trigger, Cohen appeared from the shadows, her rifle poised with lethal precision. A shot rang out, and the soldier crumpled. "Sergeant, are you all right?" she shouted, rushing to his side. "I am fine," Anderson replied, shaking off the disorientation. "We need to regroup," Wes raised. Cohen's expression darkened as the reality of their situation sank in. "I don't know, we have to find him." Anderson surged to his feet, scanning the chaos around them. The battle was still fierce, but there was a glimmer of hope. The tide was beginning to turn, the German forces beginning to falter. "Cohen, we need to push back. If we can hold this position, we might just secure a foothold," he urged, adrenaline flooding his veins. Together, they moved through the fray, determination burning in their hearts as they searched for Rays. The battle around them was chaotic, but Anderson felt a sense of purpose driving him forward, the drive to protect his comrades, to ensure that every sacrifice would be honored. Eventually, they found Rays, still propped against the wall, his breathing shallow but steady. "I am here, brother," Anderson said, relief flooding his heart. With Cohen's help, they carefully lifted Rays, moving him toward the relative safety of the command center. The battle outside raged on, but Anderson felt the strength of their unity together. They could face anything. As they entered the command center, the atmosphere shifted. Their fellow soldiers rallied around them, the tide of battle beginning to turn. The Allied reinforcements had arrived, pushing back against the German forces with renewed vigor. Anderson turned to the officer in charge, urgency in his voice. "If we can break their lines, we can disrupt their entire operation." "Agreed. Let us rally the troops," the officer shouted, and the energy of determination ignited as soldiers began to regroup, rallying around Anderson and Cohen, ready to fight back against oppression. Together, they charged into the heart of battle, the spirit of freedom surging through them. The sound of gunfire filled the air, but amidst it all, they felt the weight of history shifting. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for a future, a beacon of hope that would shine through the darkness of tyranny. As the battle unfolded, the dust began to settle, the German forces faltering under the unyielding spirit of the Allied troops. Anderson felt a swell of pride as they moved forward, pushing back against the encroaching shadows. They had turned the tide, rewriting history one courageous act at a time. When the last gun fell silent, a collective cheer erupted among the troops. They had fought not just for themselves, but for every soldier who had come before them, every sacrifice made in the name of freedom. The realization washed over Anderson as he looked around at his comrades, weary yet triumphant. Cohen turned to him, her eyes glistening with tears of relief. "We did it," she breathed, a smile breaking through the exhaustion. Anderson nodded, the weight of their victory settling in. They had faced their demons, uncovered secrets hidden beneath the rubble, and emerged stronger. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice steady. "The fight for freedom continues, but we've taken a stand. We've secured a future for those who will come after us." As they embraced their victory, Anderson,